Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think the five of you have made a very compelling case of how devastating a sequester could be. And Madam Chair, let me just say to you what a great pleasure it is to participate in my first Senate Appropriations Committee hearing. I wish it was under more pleasant circumstances. Before I turn to our witnesses for some questions, I'd like to make 2 points. Sequestration threatens damaging cuts for New Mexico's national labs, military facilities, and border security. If implemented, those cuts will be very damaging, I believe, to our national security. Sequestration will also be very damaging to some of New Mexico's most vulnerable: children in need of a quality education, rural communities struggling with housing, and homeless veterans seeking emergency shelter. Mr. Werfel and Mr. Carter, my first question goes to you. New Mexico's national security laboratories, Los Alamos and Sandia, work to support our stockpile stewardship mission. I believe the sequesters across-the-board cuts, including the 9.4% cuts facing the National Security Administration weapons account, will hamper the important stockpile stewardship work across the country. Needless to say, there is absolutely zero tolerance for mistakes when dealing with nuclear weapons. Are you concerned that sequestration cuts pose unacceptable risk to the NNSA? And is DOD concerned about the impacts on its strategic missions as a result? Mr. Werfel, why don't you go first on that?
I will start. Because, as you mentioned, I think NNSA does fall within the defense category in the sequester. Therefore, it faces roughly an 8% cut, which will be applied, as I understand it, evenly across all NNSA labs and plants. You mentioned Sandia. It's my understanding that critical milestones will be delayed for that lab as a result of the sequester. For Los Alamos, we're looking at a $46 million cut to procurement, hiring freezes, and furlough days for certain employees. So absolutely, there is significant concern. There's concern across government. Your question about NSA, I think, is it's not safe from the impacts of sequester.
Mr. Carter?
We're the customer for NNSA. We're the ones who depend upon them making a safe, secure, and reliable nuclear arsenal that we can put aboard our delivery system. So I am concerned about it. It is, Mr. Werfel says, at a minimum, stretches out all the stockpile life extension programs, which is not good because it makes them, first of all, more expensive, and second of all, we don't have time in many of those cases. So I am concerned about it, very much concerned about it.
Thank you for those answers. And I'm going to do everything I can if we go into this sequester to make sure that we protect these national laboratories that are real jewels. Mr. Carter, New Mexico's military installations, Cannon Air Force Base, Kirtland Air Force Base, Holloman Air Force Base, White Sands Missile Range, and part of Fort Bliss are unique to our nation's national security objectives due to New Mexico's large, unencumbered airspace, unique geography, and intellectual capital. The sequester will impact long-term readiness as well as future defense research in favor of a reckless plan to reduce the budget, and I think you've talked a little bit about that. Are you concerned with the impacts of the sequester on these New Mexico installations? What are the near and short-term consequences of reduced training at Air Force bases and the reduction of research and development at White Sands and the Air Force Research Lab and similar test ranges?
In the near term, you will see in the final months of this year a sharp curtailment of range activity and other training activities. We don't have any choice about that. We're just simply going to run out of money in those operations and maintenance accounts. In the long run, if the reductions in budgetary authority forecast, which in our case is around $500 billion over 10 years, not all of these facilities can survive. We asked last year for BRAC authority even to make the adjustments, the huge adjustment we're already making, the $487 billion that we absorbed last year. That $487 billion, those cuts extend over 10 years. And you can't keep the tooth if you're not able to cut the tail. So inevitably, some of these installations are going to have to be reduced. So both in the near term and the far term, it will have an effect on those installations. We just don't have any choice.
Mr. Carter, you mentioned in your testimony, and I'm wrapping up, Madam Chair. You mentioned in your testimony about small business being hurt by this. I think that could be a real impact in New Mexico and across the country. Thank you, Madam Chair.